ladies and gentlemen. So I think, we are going to discuss a few aspects of upskilling. We're going to also discuss, how to address this situation. And with us, I have a very interesting panel. And but the first thing that we thought we wanted to do was to talk about, if we want to upskill, and all of us work for large organizations, and a lot of you are HR professionals, thinking about your organizations, thinking about your people. But unless we kind of take it upon ourselves and look inward and see what are we doing to upskill ourselves, I don't know we are ever going to be able to figure out what does the organization need and so on. I thought, we'll just start with a little introduction of the panelists by asking them this simple, innocuous question, which is that what are our panelists doing to upskill themselves? What are they learning? What are they doing today that they think they don't possess? And how are they thinking about it? And I would like each and every member of the audience here also to start thinking in that direction, just to reflect upon yourself. We talk about, this is a non-controversial topic, right? Everybody understands that upskilling is very, very important. So if all of you can also start thinking, maybe jot down a few lines and go and reflect upon it when you reach home or after this session as to what is it that you would like to do to upskill yourself. What is that one skill that you don't possess that you would like to improve upon? I think you would yourself have done yourselves a great favor. So I'll start with Salian, and I'll ask her to tell us something about what is she doing to upskill her skills.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. So Rimpal, before I start, since you're the moderator, let's ask you.
Okay, so yeah, just to give a little background, right? I'm a financial guy. I used to be an investment banker, worked in New York, came back to India, and so on. So I'm a financial guy, and for the last 4 or 5 years, I run a few investment businesses. But I have been on a slightly different trip. So we have been, I've been exploring, thinking, what is it that I really want to do? So finance doesn't cut it for me anymore. I need to do it for a living. But what is it that I really, really want to do and understand? So one of the things that I'm doing these days is delving into ancient wisdom, trying to figure out, the lack of spirituality in today's organizations, the lack of humanness in today's organizations, the lack of total moral compass in today's leaders and today's business organizations. And how do we address that, and what ails us, and what is it that we can do? And since I'm a victim of the same corporate rat race, I started to think about what is it that I want to do. So I have been kind of upgrading my skills and learning and reading more about the lost ancient wisdom, which is so vast and rich in a country like ours, that we can spend many lifetimes thinking about that. So that is something that I am trying to do. And so I hope that answered your question, Salian.
Yes.
So why don't we hear about what you are up to?
So I'm upskilling right now. If I look at the last week, I learned about the Mechanical Turk on AWS. I learned about AWS Transcribe. Last night I tinkered on Firebase. And the hardest part that I'm upskilling on, which has been the last 4 months since I came into India, is I'm upskilling on being a female in tech, running a company in India. I'm upskilling on that.
Stereotype.
Yes. Go ahead.
Honestly, a whole bunch of things. It's awesome when you retire. You have so much time on your hand. If you want to learn, there is so much. I'm actually doing a Coursera course on learning to learn, a Nat Geo course on how the brain learns and thinks. I'm learning to build a website, building my website, learning to play the keyboard. I'm actually post-production photography. I'm learning Aboriginal history and how to make better omelets. Whole bunch.
And he's 59.
9.
There you go.
That's a tough act to follow for me.
I know, right?
So I'm upskilling around some of the technology skills, around machine learning, data science, etc. But then I've just realized right now I'm upskilling myself on being a good panelist. This is a really good learning by doing experience.
And you and I have an experience on that because we butted heads last night on the panel, and you know what? We're friends now. So we're both learning that.
All right, great. So I think that was just a little introduction, and I would really, really appreciate if you guys all, reflect upon it and pick up a few skills. But again, I think what I am most struck about, and being a non-technology guy, the previous speakers, Vikas and Samir, they also talked about technology. And when we talk about upskilling or think about upskilling, everybody is just so focused, so myopic on technology that, when we talk about upskilling, we need to learn programming, we need to learn coding, we need to understand machine learning, AI, robotics, and all of the buzzwords. But there was a recent study from Harvard where Salian also teaches, and Carnegie Foundation. It suggests that 85% of jobs, 85% of jobs, or the success of 85% of jobs is determined by the softer aspects of your personality rather than the harder part, which is the technical part. So if only 15 to 20% of what you do and the success of what you do is determined by the hard skills, then why are we so focused on the hard skills? You want to start answering or thinking about that, Salian, as to why are we and what should we do? So why is the easy part? What should we do and how should we address that?
Sure. So if I were to ask everyone in the audience to think about any exceptional person in any field, is it their degree or their aptitude you recall about them being exceptional? Or is it that intangible thing that you can't really put your finger on, but you know it when you see it? So let's look at our brilliant Indian citizens who have gone on to excel in the world. So if we look at women like Indra Nuhi, or we look at Sundar, or we look at, any really brilliant ones, what they're actually known for. Sundar is his skill of diplomacy. Indra Nuhi, it's her skill of communication. So we all know it. Yet we all focus very much on aptitude, and we're missing really two key parts of what makes us human. And I think, the gentleman before spoke about that. What are the things that make us human? It's our behavior, and it's our situational judgment. And these are the predictors. We all know resumes are not the predictors of performance. And what does resume show us? All of our aptitude. It's actually these, and we can call it soft skills, we can call it human skills, we can call it 21st century skills. We're all talking about the same exact thing. And we have not yet seen, particularly in India, in the education system and in the workforce, where that is being taken seriously and being taught, just like we are taught how to code, or we're taught math and science in school. So it is going to be a major issue for India very shortly. It's coming right there, around the corner.
So what is the solution?
So the solution for it, we have some forward-thinking directors. So there is one IIM Kozhikode. Debashree Chatterjee is the director there, where they have started reducing the hard skills in the curriculum. So it's going to have to come from the top down. I don't think we're going to have corporate or from the bottom up lead the way in this. I think it's going to come from the top down, where hard skills have now been reduced to 80% of the curriculum. I think we have initiatives like Skills India, where you're going to have to see it coming from the top, where we have to incorporate these predictors of performance as a norm. And, it should start in India. I mean, some of the brightest talent in the world, just look at the size of our population here. It should start here, and India can really set the example for the rest of the world, particularly with our brilliant young people in this area. So I do think we will start seeing it from the top down.
Good. Ian?
I think the biggest change in Industry 4.0, call it, the digital revolution, is that for the first time, technology is not just for tech companies. It's cutting across all. And its manifestation is that we're actually creating very different solutions and experience. For example, precision agriculture, we use drones, IoTs, analytics to triple, let's say, corn production. Or somebody put a sensor in Rafael Nadal's racket to improve his tennis performance. That's a change. When that happens, the three kinds of skill sets are emerging that are different from tradition. One is technical skills, they've always been there. It's just that the shelf life of a technical skill is dropping from as much about 25 to 30 years to 2 to 3 years, so somebody has to learn. Second is a very, very different kinds of roles. If you talk to anybody swimming in the digital space, we are talking about DevOps engineers, we are talking about full stack developers, we are talking about digital storytellers, we are talking about data scientists, where it's not just the technology, but how are you translating that into, let's say, human experience and answer. And finally, front-end conversation with customers. Easy was the times when we just had to go and sell technology to technology. Everyone speaks hieroglyphs and deals are signed. Not so anymore. Now you have to sell technology to business and help them understand, which means that areas like the design thinking, critical thinking, how do you even articulate a problem? How do you even articulate a solution? I think the first part is getting done quite well, technical skills. And I think onset of realization that you have to teach people to learn if they have to learn a new skill. The second and third parts, I think, is where there's a bit of a struggle here. If you people get into part programming, how do they collaborate? So there, one of the CLOs said, soft skills is really the new hard skill. Without that, it fails. I think it's at the start. What I've seen over the last 6 to 8 quarters really is an acceleration of putting a whole lot of that into learning skill. People are not just learning skills, they're also learning soft skills a lot more in the critical thinking. I think it's beginning to happen. So it's a question of how quickly we can accelerate injection of that into learning curriculums. I think it's actually looking good if we just continue to speed that up a little more.
Okay. Yogesh, your thoughts? And if the HR managers of today can do something to accelerate that? Same question.
So I'll just pick on
Sure.
pick from where Ian left. I think this technology is an enabler, and it has always been an enabler in the past as well. However, there is a lot of focus on technology driving this. It is not really technology that is driving this. This is humankind has been evolving right from the Stone Age. We are using our ancestors used stone tools to create artifacts, to create products, and then through the different ages, today we are in this knowledge age where we're using technology. But technology also existed that time. It was always an enabler. And that time the technology was different tools that we were using. So, the point I want to really drive on is technology, the focus that goes so much on reskilling and upskilling on the technology is disproportionate. There should be, to what Sally was also mentioning, there should be a lot more focus on the human skills, because that is what really drives success. So that's point number one. The second piece I also want to hit on is, as we look to upskill, one of the key components towards upskilling and making this a movement rather than an organizational or a corporate program that is pushed down, there has to be a lot more buy-in. And that's where I think we have to find the right balance of a top-down approach of where, there is an articulation of a vision and what is required, or what skills are required to achieve that vision, but also really understanding what does these individuals who are actually out in the trenches on the front lines need. And there has to be this balance that we have to achieve where, there is a organizational objective, however, there is also an individual aspiration, and we have to find that happy medium where this is really meaningful for both the organization at large, but also the individuals, and that is what will really drive success. That is what will really drive value creation.
Okay. No, this is very interesting. But again, there is another study, another school of thought, and I agree with all of these, all the panelists. I again read something which talked about US generates about 100,000 engineers a year for a 16 trillion economy, and India is generating about 1.6 million engineers for a 2.5 trillion economy. So obviously, all of the engineers can't be absorbed in the workforce, and to say that they are not skilled, I think, is an understatement, because they are probably not skilled for the jobs that exist. There are so many jobs that are required for dietitians, beauticians, and all of that, and nobody's even thinking about that. And then, I think let's just move on to another aspect of the same problem. So another study which suggests that in 2030, a majority of the jobs that are going to exist, a majority of roles, functions that are going to exist, don't even exist today. So the problem that all of us have in our organizations is, yes, we want them to upskill, we want our staff to be up to date with technology and functions and all of that good stuff. But what do we train if we don't even know what's the state going to be in 2030, in 15, 20 years from now? How do we address that? How do we shed that haziness, and how do we make the organizations look forward and think ahead? Salyan?
So the first thing, Rimpal, is you can't use any statistics about engineers in India, right? Because in India, you become an engineer and then you decide what you're going to do, right? So they're not valid in terms of statistics. In reference to these jobs, 2030, and not knowing what's there, I mean, let's look at where we're standing right now. Do most of us actually even know in existing jobs, other than aptitude, what is it that our top performers need to be top performers? Most of us don't know because we are not looking at behaviors of our top performers. So let's look at the traditional where we're standing right now, how we're upskilling our current workforce. Many of us have LMS platforms. We have rules. We map what we think are the things that should be learned for that role, or we have some kind of onboarding system of, if you're with me for 12 months, you need to be doing this. We're checking the box on it. Most of us, if I were to ask this room, how much of your LMS platforms are being used, most of us do not have a lot of engagement, even on our platforms. I mean, if you look at all the big ones, Coursera, Khan Academy, they're not sticky. People are not using them. They're under 10%, most of these LMS platforms existing right now. So to get to your question, the skills, if I go back, and I love using Satya's words, those of us who are going to matter in the future are those of us who are most human. So even the work you're doing in studying, going back to religion and history, you're actually reconnecting to what makes us more human. So those jobs, I did a project recently where I mapped the future of work. I took jobs that were coming down the pipeline. I mean, we can't look 2030. None of us know. But let's take the next 3 years. So a job in the next 3 years will be a role, I'll give you an example, an AI human integrator. Every HR department or people division is going to have that role. What skills do you need for that? I probably can't tell you the technical skills because the technology is exponential in terms of what would be needed for that, but I can tell you the human skills that would be needed for that. I can actually put a combination of them together, so I will probably need someone with high emotional IQ, judgment and decision making. These are the kinds of things that I think we know for sure because, the human is always coming to the table. As my lovely colleague here kind of explained, the value of, technology, learning technical skills, the shelf life of it is a couple of years. The shelf life of everyone in here who has kids in university, they're lucky by the time they graduate if the piece of paper they come out with has any value at all. So to answer your question on aptitude, I have no idea. None of us know. Nobody can know. But I do know the human skills. And it's the same ones we keep talking about all the time, and those are the things we're going to have to sharpen.
So, I agree. So if I am hearing you correct and understanding you correct, you're saying that the LMS systems that are an integral part of our organizations today are not functioning or not functioning optimally. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? And we need to do something about it?
Okay, so if there's any LMS providers in the room, you cannot throw stuff at me, but they are not functioning. Most people will tell you they're not functioning by how does what I'm actually upskilling in tie to KPIs and an ROI. Most people can't tell you.
So what do we do? Ian, give us the answers, wise man.
LMS, defined in a conventional sense, doesn't cut. Because all they were doing was a lot of compliance work, assigned to people, the mandatory trainings, capture the data. Not so any longer. You still have a legacy LMSs, be it Pluralsight, be it Cornerstone, any of them underlying. There is a whole new breed of learner experience platforms like EdCast, like Degree, sitting on top of that. They're actually dealing with a couple of things. First is, you don't anymore have all the time, the learning curve time on the job. I mean, there was a time where I could learn mainframe programming and then get 8 months on the job. Now it has moved to a small amount of macro learning, tiny nuggets of micro learning. Every 3 minutes I learn a new skill. And most importantly, what we call a performance support learning. I'm actually programming, I get stuck, I can quickly learn. My LMS will say, hey, look, you seem stuck with a query writing program, it comes up out there. That's one part. Second, more important part is, finally demolishing of what I call the story of the much maligned hearts. I'm sure HR and learning function, you find the adage of, you can take a horse to the water, you can't make it drink. I think that's rubbish. It's a horse, it's not a donkey. What makes you think the horse is thirsty? Maybe it wants a beer, maybe it's afraid of water. But what model learning systems are doing is, you say, hey, look, your horse, you're a smart animal. When you want to learn, where you want to learn, how you want to learn, and how much you want to learn, I'll actually prompt content your way. They have ranking systems, they have a machine learning that actually say, look, Ian likes to watch too many videos, he doesn't like PDFs. So the new age learning systems, let's say, bolted on top of our traditional learning systems, are actually capable of what I call the performance support. Inline learning, they actually say, look, they teach me the way I want to learn, not a batch size of 50 people in a classroom, batch size equal to 1. The adoption, these have really taken off over the last 6 quarters. NASCOM has adopted EdCast as a skilling platform. Many corporations have incorporated Degree as a skilling platform. I think that's beginning to change. So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't summarily trash our LMSs. Traditional LMS with an overlay of a learner experience platforms actually cut the job.
Okay. Yogesh?
I'll just start from where, one of the points that Sally mentioned, which was around ROI. I think one of the, there's a lot of focus on LMS and creating content, but the purpose of all of this is to really drive an outcome. Be it from a business perspective, it is a return on investment, or from an individual perspective in terms of experience, etc. So this to me, using that the Lominger ratios of 70-20-10, this is really 10% of the overall learning journey. There's a 90% piece which sometimes gets overlooked, and that is where really the ROI is. That is where really the skill building is, because I can, with the amount of content that is on that is available on Coursera, if you put a person with access to internet, that person may be able to complete most of that content over the next 2 years, 3 years time, dedicatedly, or that is relevant to them. But just listening to or watching that content doesn't mean those skills are existing now. That's where we as business leaders, as well as the community out here, the HR leaders, have to really figure out how do we create opportunities for people to take this learning that they've had, the 10%, and give them the rest 90% so that this can become a skill. And I think that is the trick which sometimes is, which causes this, which leads to this lack of stickiness in terms of this learning or skills. Because if you're not able to practice this, we're going to forget what we've heard or what we have seen.
I just want to add to that, so we all talk about learning journeys. Well, there is something called a forgetting curve that nobody talks about. So just how you have a learning curve, there's a forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve, it's called Ebbinghaus's rule. After 10 days of any information coming in, if it is not either taught or put into practice, the retention is less than 20%. So the fact that I have analytics saying, even if there's high engagement, that does not mean it's actually being translated out there in terms of at the workplace. So that's something that nobody talks about at all. It's pretty silent. I'm yet to see any kind of platform that says, now that you've learned, please, show how that has been put into practice over, because that's where, learning is an output. I've done it. Where is the outcome and impact? No one's really talking about that.
I think, sorry, if I just can add, I think our employees are really smart. They also recognize the linkage between the learning that or any training that they're doing, online, offline, whichever model or whichever channel. How does that really translate into something that they can apply in their work? And if they don't see that connection, that's where the lack of interest or the lack of attention starts, or the disengagement starts. And I think that's where we have to start giving our employees also a lot more respect, as well as a lot more, a lot more rating or a lot more grades in terms of they are quite smart. They know where the world is going. It's not only the purview of the leaders to really know where the world is going. Our employees are equally smart. They have access to probably almost similar level of information that is available to leaders nowadays. So I think that's where we have to really listen to what our employees are looking to do.
Yeah, so I think, I end it finally with a slightly big picture question. So I was thinking of phrasing it in terms of what is HR doing about it, or what can HR do about it in terms of what are the tools, apps, etc. that are available. But let me flip it around and say, this is a pervasive problem. Technology is a given. We know without technology we can't solve this problem. Even the upskilling problem requires a deep level of technological intervention. So tomorrow, we all know are the election results. We're going to get a new government, hopefully the same government. Narendra Modi just appoints Sally Ann as the skill czar. Somebody who has to think about, so we have a Skill India initiative. And I don't know what they're doing, honestly. I mean, they're doing something, I'm sure they are. But what are the 2 or 3 things that you would like to see top down so that India as a nation can look at it as a problem that needs to be tackled, and how do we go about tackling that problem? So that can be then distilled into our own small little organizations and our departments then.
So one of, the 3 things for me, I'll just, address it very, very quickly. We cannot be having a discussion about the future of work for India without discussing it with looking at the entire pipeline of the education system of 14 and 15-year-olds. When we talk about your statistic of 2030, well, guess what? Who is the workforce of 2030? It's going to be those 14 and 15-year-olds. And we seem to be having this very segregated conversation about schools and education, upskilling, and corporates. So that conversation from the top down, I think, the same, a 14-year-old needs to know communication and critical thinking and emotional IQ just as a 59-year-old, right? Those same exact things. So I think that's one thing. So it has to be unified. So I think the government of India really needs to look at it not as segregated. I'm dealing with corporates, I'm dealing with industry, but let's look at the next 10, 15 years for India and that whole, so that's one. The second thing I think we need to look at, just from the size of the population, there is behavioral data. I mean, just think about the data that's out there from whether it's psychometrics companies, LMS companies. We actually know for India what are the behavioral sets for this country within organizations. And that analytics is right there. So we, as much as we're focusing on what the skills gaps might be in hard skills, we can actually figure that out with all of this data. So I think if the government actually sets up a task force and starts dealing with LMS systems, psychometric systems, everyone who has access, job search portals, and we have access to all of that data on what is needed by industry segments, what are the behavioral gaps, and what we are actually solving for in India in terms of, I think that would be, at that point, you actually have a clear path and you know exactly what you're building towards. So that would be the second thing. And the third thing, and this is very, very personal to me, the third thing, particularly because, as you know, I have a foundation side of what I do beside tech company and the young people of India. So, our workforce primarily in India are millennials. And when I tell people I have a tech company in India, my other parts of the company is in Europe and the US, they often say to me, but why? You can't get that quality of design, quality of thought, the ability to innovate and speak up. And I think if for India to really kind of stand out, we really have to look at it as a global player and how it is viewed. Young Indians are viewed from the outside world, and really take a hard look of what it is we're not doing to get them, not as the worker bees, but to be C-suite levels and decision makers on a global stage. So those are three kind of layers, if I had to say, that I would look at.
Sure. No, that's great. That's great. Anything that you want to add, Ian?
I'm not getting predictive about what happens tomorrow, but the government, in anticipation of a victory, actually had the HR ministry create a small group to look at how educational systems are going to be transformed over the next 5 years. I would really be disappointed if we don't see 2 or 3 things in that. The first and foremost, the whole assessment systems, they're so pretty messed up today. All our assessment systems are based on testing the knowledge rather than testing the skill. I know how to fly a plane, I can answer any question from a pilot's manual of an A380. That doesn't mean I can fly a plane. I'll crash it in 30 milliseconds. Number one. The second, the length of the courses itself. Let's say if the 4-year undergrad engineering program, I think the length itself is becoming dysfunctional. If I were to do it, I'll probably crunch it to 2 years, because what I learn in year 1 and year 2, 90% of it is actually irrelevant by the time I graduate. So how do I actually crunch the length, align it much more to an outcome performance in what I call education should give a manufacturer's warranty. If I buy a refrigerator to and plug in, it knows what to do. But if university trains somebody and put him in the production, they have no clue what to do. They ask for a learning curve. So in terms of crunching it and bringing the learning at its ability to an outcome to what they need to perform on the job, and assessment systems is where I'm certainly hoping to see a lot of change.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yogesh, you?
Just one thing, I would, traditionally we've always thought of learning as something that you do in the early part of your life, and then you've learned and now you're ready. I think taking inspiration from Ian at 59 is learning new skills, building a website, playing, musical instrument, or learning new musical instruments.
His 7th musical instrument.
7th
right?
musical instrument. I stand corrected. So, that's really what I would hope, that if it's a government-wide program, how do we create opportunities for lifelong learning? Because that is what really help us leverage the power of the intellect, as well as the abilities that Sally mentioned across our nation.
And I want to add one thing really quick. So one initiative that would be an example is the government of Singapore has a $500 credit to every citizen in that country to upskill. So just think about that across, for India, particularly for women. Think about it for some reason in India, well, except for my buddy here, when you're over 50, you consider yourself old. How do we get our population that's in their 50s and 60s to actually realize this is the best time to learn, right? They're most young at those age, and how do we create initiatives? So that example of a $500 credit to upskill and being able to use that, I think it would be a wonderful thing to see across India.
Great. No, I think we are out of time, so we will not take any more discussion questions. But if there is any burning question out there for any of our panelists, And I think if we have the facility to ask questions, otherwise, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I hope we were able to bring out some facets of this topic. It's a non-controversial topic. We understand there is a whole lot of things that we need to do. And I am hoping that the audience here will pick up some nuggets from our panelists and implement them in their organizations. But thank you very much for attentively listening
Thank you
to
very
us.
much,
And,
Rimpal.
Thanks a lot.
had fun. Thank you.
Thank you.